Welcome to the Golden Valley Light Railway video platform. This is a restoration blog video. Baby Jane Restoration Blog. Number 8. February 2024. Following on from the previous article, I was left with a plan to implement the revised wiring diagram, with the controller connections of the motor and resistor wires, laid out as at the Lee Bailey Light Railways GVLR 5. I firstly had to remove the battery box and pull back all the motor and resistor wires to individually clean and inspect them, as some had damage to the cable insulation which needed to be repaired with rubber paint or heat shrink tubing, dependent upon how bad the damage was. I also stripped off the perished and crumbling insulation on the cable controller terminals and added fresh heat shrink insulation, plus a label band to indicate which cable was which, as per the wiring diagram nomenclature. Whilst the wires were out the way, I routed the horn tails and I fitted the new horn. The original was beyond repair, but interestingly I was able to buy the exact part number of the original, for a reasonable price. Although it looked different, I routed and secured its wiring tails and connected it up. It can be seen looking a bit too shiny and new. The cables were then passed up into the control box and routed carefully into the vicinity of the terminals upon the contactor and reverser where they would be connected. Each was then carefully connected, as per the wiring diagram. I had sourced the correct locking internal star washers for the brass terminal studs and nuts, and the cable terminals were carefully installed so that they were clear of one another and any parts of the contactor block so as to avoid any short circuit. With everything checked and the battery condition gauge refitted, after the main power cables were connected, we were ready for testing. I had devised a safe way of initial testing with the loco up on blocks, with the wheels free to rotate, so Baby Jane was pushed outside in case a fire was to ensue, and jacked up. Starter batteries were borrowed from some locos in the shed and placed in the battery box. With the emergency disconnect switch open, the batteries were connected up safely. Then when the switch was made, the control box was made live. This could be seen by the green light on the battery condition gauge. There was no big flash or smoke, so with relief I then moved on to the next logical test. As the control box was now powered, the low current wiring should be all operational. This would mean that the horn should sound when the button was pressed, and it did issue a strident, quite piercing peep when it was pressed. Further relief was felt, bolstered by the shout of "sounds promising" that came from Ed in the shed. The next test was the big one. Would the contactors work and the motor turn the wheels? I selected forwards on the reverser and pressed down on the deadman's handle, listening carefully for the low current wiring interlocks to function. I heard them click, sounded promising. This meant when the handle was moved towards notch 1, the main contactor should be energized, making the high current contactors supply the motor with energy and the wheels turn. As I rotated the handle toward notch 1, there was a reassuring clunk as the main contactor was made, and the wheels began to turn. Success! The handle was released and the motor stopped as the main contactor disengaged, proving the interlocks were working correctly. I returned the handle back to notch 0, pressed it down again and rotated it to notch 1. The wheels turned again, and then they increased in speed as I turned the handle further to notch 2, then not as noticeably faster but seemingly quicker at notch 3, the difference being more noticeable as you went from 3 back to 2 and then 1 to 0, where it all fell quiet again. It was all functioning correctly. The emergency disconnect was operated and we took it off the blocks. Neil was given some instruction on the controls and stood upon the footplate. The disconnect was made. He engaged forward, pressed down on the deadman's handle and moved it towards notch 1. It lurched a bit forwards and, becoming slightly unbalanced, he let go of the handle and the loco stopped. After further encouragement and some help from Ed, who walked alongside initially, he soon mastered the controls and went up to the end of the head shunt, and then with the deadman's back at 0 was able to select reverse. It is mechanically interlocked so you cannot change direction when under power. He did a further couple of trips and then let Ed have a go, who tried it against the brake to feel the change in power between notch 2 and 3. Some mechanical problems with the brake and wheels were noted, and a list of further work, including a seat, was discussed. The first test had been a success, and I felt a sense of achievement and fulfillment. I will finish this installment here, but will produce another when further work has been done to the mechanical restoration of the locomotive, but for now the electromechanical side is successfully completed. That concludes this restoration blog. Please consider to like this video by checking the thumbs up symbol. You may want to subscribe to the channel to see further episodes and other content on the GVLR video platform.